Okay, so we're diving deep into self-care for moms,
Uh-huh.
but not the the bubble bath and wine night kind of.
Right.
Although those are great too.
Yeah, yeah.
We're looking at two sources that go way beyond the usual treat yourself stuff
Okay.
to uncover what actually helps when you're juggling kids and work and all
Yeah.
the things, right?
Yeah.
So what I found fascinating is how both these sources kind of reframe this whole self-care thing.
What's interesting is they both talk about how it's not a luxury.
Right.
It's actually a necessity.
Yeah.
It's like a secret weapon to
Okay.
fight burnout.
Interesting.
And it's essential if you want to be the best parent you could be.
Yeah, no guilt tricks allowed.
There we
We're all on board with that.
Exactly.
Now, we all know the typical self-care tips like meditation, setting boundaries, drinking enough water,
Yeah.
but
Honestly,
sometimes that feels impossible.
it does. Sometimes it feels impossible, like when you got a toddler clinging to your leg.
So one thing that stood out to me in these sources is how much they emphasize finding these little moments of self-care in your everyday routine.
Yeah, one of them called it like these micro moments
Okay,
of rejuvenation.
I like that.
Yeah, so even something as simple as taking like 30 seconds to breathe deeply while you're at a red light,
Oh, I like that.
or can folding laundry become like a mindful exercise?
Right.
It's about shifting your perspective to find those little moments of peace throughout the day.
It's like sneaking vegetables
Yeah.
into a smoothie, but
Uh,
for your mental health.
exactly.
Okay, so speaking of unexpected approaches, one of the sources talked about how decluttering can actually be a really powerful form of self-care.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, they suggest that all the physical clutter in our lives kind of mirrors the mental clutter we're carrying around.
Right, right.
So by creating order in your physical space, you might actually reduce some stress.
What do you think about that?
I think it makes total sense.
Yeah,
Like a chaotic environment, it definitely fuels my stress.
for sure.
Even if it's just tackling like one corner of the house,
Totally.
to create a sense of order, it can be really calming.
It's amazing how much of a difference it makes.
Okay, but here's where things get even more interesting.
Huh?
One source challenged this whole idea that self-care is only an individual responsibility.
Okay.
They're saying that, we need societal support for mothers
Mm.
if we want them to truly thrive.
I see.
So, for example, like access to affordable childcare, that would be
It's
huge
huge.
for so many moms.
Absolutely.
What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a really, really important point.
Yeah.
Because, like, yes, individual self-care strategies, those are key,
Right.
but we can't ignore the bigger picture here.
Of course not.
Like systemic changes, affordable childcare, paid parental leave, those things would make a world of difference,
Wow.
in easing the burden on mothers and actually creating a society that supports their well-being.
Yeah,
But those changes take time.
they do.
So the question is, how do we navigate self-care in the meantime?
Exactly. It's about finding those ways to take care of ourselves
Mhm.
within the reality of our current situation
Right.
without, losing sight of the need for bigger changes.
Yeah, I like that.
And one thing that both sources emphasized is the importance of setting boundaries,
Oh, absolutely.
which, let's be real,
Yeah,
can feel impossible sometimes.
that's hard.
Right.
It is.
It's like, how do you do that?
So how do you actually set boundaries?
Yeah, like what does that even look like?
Yeah, good question.
Because, it's one thing to say it, but to actually implement it,
Right. It's totally different.
it can be really tricky.
Well, it's about, I think, recognizing your own limits first
Okay.
and then communicating those limits really clearly.
So, like, what would that sound like?
It could be something as simple as saying no to taking on another commitment.
Oh, that's hard.
It is hard.
Yeah.
Or it could be asking your partner, hey, can you handle bedtime tonight? Or even just carving out 15 minutes for yourself each day where you're just like, this is my time.
Yeah.
It's not being selfish. It's
Uh,
about protecting your energy and your mental health.
Yeah.
So you can actually be the best parent you can be.
So it's kind of like putting your own oxygen mask on first.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've talked about sneaking in those micro moments of self-care,
Yeah.
the connection between decluttering and having a clearer mind
Right.
and setting boundaries, even when it feels tough.
Important stuff.
So those are all great starting points, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But what about those times when you're just running on fumes?
Oh, I know those times well.
And even the thought of self-care feels exhausting.
Right. Like it's just one more thing on the to-do list.
Exactly. So one source had this really interesting advice for those moments.
Okay, let's hear it.
They said to embrace those and they emphasized tiny moments of rejuvenation.
I like where this is going.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
So instead of thinking you need an hour-long yoga class or a spa day,
Right, which is just not realistic most of the time.
exactly.
Yeah.
They're talking about things like, taking a nap when the baby naps,
Okay.
guilt-free,
Yes, guilt-free.
or incorporating like simple stretches throughout the day.
Oh, I like that.
Like maybe even while you're playing with your kids
Yeah.
or doing a quick breathing exercise before you answer the phone.
That's a good one.
It's those little things, but they can be really powerful.
I agree.
And it's about, not needing a special occasion for self-care.
Exactly. Making it part of your everyday life.
And that actually reminds me of something else that both sources emphasized.
Yeah.
Mindfulness.
Yes.
But not necessarily in the sense of like a 30-minute meditation session.
Okay. Right.
It was more about finding those moments of presence in your regular routine.
Yeah. Like that.
So like paying attention to your breath while you're washing dishes,
Okay.
or really savoring that first sip of coffee without scrolling through your phone, or engaging all your senses while you're taking a walk, even if it's just for a few minutes.
Yeah, those little moments make a difference.
They really do.
Yeah.
It's about finding those pockets of peace in the everyday chaos of life.
Exactly.
And when we talk about finding peace in motherhood,
Yeah.
I have to admit, sometimes it feels like a distant land, you know?
Oh, I hear you.
Like, is that even possible
Right.
to actually feel peaceful as a mom?
Yeah, especially when you're in the thick of it.
So what do you say to moms who are listening and thinking, peace? Yeah, right. That's not happening in my world.
That's a good question.
Like, what advice do these sources offer for those moments?
Yeah, because it can feel so overwhelming. And you're like, how am I supposed to find peace in this?
Exactly, when you're surrounded by demands and to-do lists.
Yeah, and just the constant juggle of everything.
It can feel really hard to even imagine feeling peaceful.
Totally. Yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
It's so easy to feel like that, like peace is this luxury you can't afford when you're a mom. But one of the sources had this really interesting take on it.
Okay.
They were saying that sometimes this pressure to achieve some like ideal state of peace,
Yeah.
it can actually be counterproductive.
Really?
Yeah, so instead of trying to chase this like unrealistic ideal,
Okay.
they suggest focusing on just cultivating moments of calm in the middle of the chaos.
Oh, I like that distinction. Moments of calm versus like achieving peace.
Exactly.
Because it's acknowledging that, like, yeah, motherhood isn't always peaceful.
Right.
And that's okay.
Exactly. And that's a good thing.
Yeah.
So, like, how do we actually do that? How do we embrace those moments of calm without buying into this pressure to be perfectly zen all the time?
Right, because that's not realistic either.
Not at all.
So what are some practical tips from the sources?
Well, one source suggested creating a mom-only space in your home.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be anything fancy.
Right.
It could just be like a comfy chair in a quiet corner
Okay.
or a shelf where you keep your favorite books.
I like that.
Just something that's a visual reminder to carve out some time for yourself.
It's like a little sanctuary.
Exactly.
Okay, so speaking of escaping, one of the sources actually tackled a topic that I thought was really interesting.
Okay, what's that?
The potential downsides of self-care.
Oh, that's an interesting angle.
Right, because we always talk about self-care as being this positive thing.
Right, like it's supposed to make you feel better.
Exactly. But
Yeah.
what if it actually adds to our stress?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So what do they say about that?
Well, one of the sources talked about how this constant pressure to self-care can actually make moms feel inadequate.
Oh, yeah.
Like they're failing if they don't have a daily meditation practice or this perfectly curated self-care routine.
Feels like it becomes one more thing on the to-do list.
Exactly. And then there's the whole commercialization of self-care.
Oh, yeah. Tell me about it.
Like you need to buy all these expensive products or book these luxurious treatments.
Right. And if you can't afford that, then you're not doing self-care.
Exactly. It's like, come on.
It totally misses the point.
It really does.
Because true self-care, it shouldn't be about spending a ton of money.
No, it's about prioritizing your well-being in a way that feels authentic to you.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
and actually feels good.
Okay, so how do we prevent self-care from becoming just another chore?
Right.
Another thing on our never-ending to-do list?
Because that's not helpful.
Not helpful at all.
So one of the sources talked about the importance of reframing our relationship with doing altogether.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, they were saying that we're so conditioned to be productive,
Yeah.
even in our downtime,
Right.
that we've forgotten how to just be.
Oh, wow. That's powerful.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's so true.
It's like we've forgotten how to just exist without having to achieve something.
Exactly. So they were advocating for embracing what they called do nothing time.
Do nothing time. I love that.
Right.
What does that look like?
It could be as simple as just sitting on the couch for 5 minutes with your eyes closed. Or finally finishing that novel that you started months ago.
Oh, that sounds amazing.
Right. And giving yourself permission to do that without feeling guilty about it.
Yes. Guilt-free relaxation.
Exactly.
I love it.
Because it's like hitting the reset button for your mind and body.
It really is.
Yeah.
But let's be real, finding even 5 minutes of do-nothing time
Right.
can feel impossible when you've got little kids.
Especially when they're little and they need you constantly.
Yes, they're like little shadows.
Exactly.
So how do we manage that?
Well, both sources actually talked about the importance of social connection as a form of self-care for moms.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, because we're social creatures, right?
We are.
And moms, especially moms with young children, often spend long hours at home alone.
It's true. It can be really isolating.
It can be. So nurturing those connections that really nourish you, whether it's meeting a friend for coffee
Yeah.
or joining a mom's group or even just having a meaningful conversation with your partner after the kids are asleep.
Yeah.
Those things can be so restorative.
And don't forget about virtual connection.
Oh, that's a good one.
Like one of the sources talked about scheduling regular video calls with friends who live far away
Yeah,
or joining online communities where you can connect with other moms.
that's such a good idea.
It's a way to combat that loneliness and feel supported.
Absolutely, because even when you can't physically be with someone,
Right.
just seeing their face and hearing their voice can make a big difference.
Yeah. And sometimes it's even those small, everyday moments of connection.
Like what?
Well, one source told this really sweet story about a mom who made it a point to have a real conversation with the barista at her local coffee shop every morning.
Oh, I love that.
And it was just those few minutes of genuine human interaction
Right.
that made her feel seen and valued.
That is so lovely.
It is, right.
Yeah, it's such a good reminder that connection doesn't have to be this big, elaborate thing.
Exactly.
It can be found in those little moments throughout your day.
But I think there are times when even with those connections, even with those little moments of joy,
Yeah.
we still hit those walls of exhaustion and overwhelm.
It's inevitable.
It is.
It's part of life.
It is. And I think that's where a lot of moms really struggle with self-care
Why do you think that is?
because it feels like one more thing to add to the list.
Right.
When in reality, they're already drowning.
They're just trying to keep their heads above water.
Exactly. So what do we do then? What do these sources suggest for those moments when even thinking about self-care feels impossible?
Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah, so it's like, how do you even begin to think about self-care when you're in that state?
Right. Because it feels impossible.
Exactly.
But one of the sources offered a really interesting perspective on this.
Okay.
They said instead of focusing on these grand gestures of self-care,
Right.
like we need to shift our focus to what they called micro moments of self-compassion.
Oh, I like that. Micro moments of self-compassion. So what does that look like?
So it's about recognizing that you are doing the best you can
Okay.
in the midst of really demanding circumstances.
Yeah.
And it's about silencing that inner critic.
The one that's always telling us we're not doing enough.
Yes. And instead offering yourself the same kind of kindness and understanding that you would give to a close friend.
Oh, that's good.
Right. So
Okay.
it's like instead of beating yourself up for ordering takeout 3 nights in a row.
Which we've all been there.
Oh, yeah.
Right.
You're acknowledging, hey, you know what? I got food on the table.
Exactly.
That's a win.
That's a huge win.
We did it.
Yes. Celebrate those small victories.
Yes.
Because it makes a huge difference
It really does.
in how we feel about ourselves and our ability to actually handle all of this.
And that actually reminds me of something else that both sources touched on,
Okay.
this idea of reframing.
Oh, interesting. Tell me more.
So one source gave this example of a mom who was just dreading bath time with her twins.
Oh, yeah. Bath time can be tough.
It can be so chaotic.
It's like a water war zone sometimes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it felt like this chore every single night.
Right.
But then she decided to try and shift her perspective.
Okay, what did she do?
So she started viewing bath time as 15 minutes of dedicated playtime with her kids.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, so she would dim the lights, put on some music.
Create a little ambiance.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just really try to be present in those moments.
That's so powerful.
And, you know, it didn't magically change the fact that it was still messy
Right.
and sometimes stressful.
Sure.
But that small shift in mindset,
Yeah.
it made it feel less like a chore
Right.
and more like an opportunity to connect.
That's a great reminder
Yeah.
that even small shifts can make a big difference.
Okay, so before we wrap up this deep dive,
Okay,
there's one more point I want to touch on that I thought was really important.
let's hear it.
Both Sources emphasize the importance of seeking support
Yes.
outside of ourselves
Okay.
when we need it. And I think that's such a powerful message, especially for moms.
It's huge because we try to do it all.
You drew.
Right. We think we have to be super mom.
Yes, and we put so much pressure on ourselves.
It's exhausting.
It is exhausting.
And the truth is, we're not meant to do this alone.
We're not.
Like whether it's reaching out to a therapist,
Okay.
joining a support group, confiding in a trusted friend or family member,
Right.
asking for help is not a weakness.
It's not.
It's a sign of strength.
It really is.
And it's a way of taking care of ourselves.
It's recognizing that we all need support sometimes,
Absolutely.
especially during the wild ride of motherhood.
100%.
Okay, so as we close out our deep dive on self-care for moms, what's one final nugget of wisdom you'd like to leave our listeners with?
You know, I think the biggest takeaway for me is that self-care is not selfish.
Yes.
It's essential.
It's essential.
And it's not about adding one more thing to your to-do list.
Please no.
Right. It's about finding sustainable ways to actually nourish yourself so you can show up as the best version of yourself
I love that.
for yourself and for those you love.
Beautifully said.
Thank you.
Give yourself permission to prioritize your well-being, Mama.
Yes.
You deserve it.